So this is a short video around our approach to portfolio decision making, so early phase to late phase, and why our new approach actually has been built over many years to be better at making decisions in portfolio decisions, product development decisions, new product planning decisions. We're the folks that build the Pharmaceutical Innovation Index, and if you remember why, it was because 10 years ago we asked ourselves the question when we wanted to understand what tends to lead to innovation, to successful commercialization. Are there processes, are there systems that tend to lead to drugs launching better than either than a direct competitor or than not launching at all? So the fundamental question was, if you gave the same drug to two different companies in early phase, ideally phase one, would they be equally successful? And as you kind of go through trying to understand that, well, we wanted to understand the behaviors and the processes that tend to lead to innovation. And by successful innovation, we mean asymmetrically better performance than somebody else. So outperforming someone who's been running in parallel with you. Clearly sitting at the core of that are definitions of invention and innovation imported from everywhere else, which is that they're not the same. So the things that tend to lead to good pipelines aren't necessarily the same behaviors that tend to lead to successful commercialization of those pipelines. So clearly we need to think about the role of surprise and agility within the process. So we started to play with this idea of if you wanted to plan serendipity, could you do it? Could you be serendipitous by design? And of course we think that you can. So we want to play with that and store this idea on the shelf for a little while in this video of planned serendipity. And then of course a lot of drugs fail because of the question that they're asked in the studies. So you've got good drugs asked the wrong question in the study and they go back on the pile of drugs that probably will never see daylight. But let's think about all of the recent case studies where drugs have outperformed somebody else. They haven't come from better molecules. They've come from better decisions taken by teams. You look at, one of the best case studies imaginable recently, we've seen two companies heading straight to market after a bunch of interesting problems when these drugs were in early development. Opdivo, Keytruda is playing out in front of us. But this isn't about the drugs actually themselves being different. This is about the decisions that were taken by the humans. So how do we think about human decision making in a situation where the molecules themselves are unpredictable in terms of their success? So how do we begin to think about what tends to lead to better decisions by humans within a development process, rather than the kind of, we're going to suggest, failed decision making model that we currently have? So our big observation, or big leap, if you like, is to think about the problem of what we have today is that it is a prediction paradigm. So most of you are working within what we would call a prediction paradigm, and we can show that the prediction paradigm has failed. The creation of TPPs, the creation of ENPVs and the forecast and everything that goes with it are failures as templates, as systems, as processes. And you can talk about how your version is slightly better than somebody else's, but it's still part of the prediction paradigm. If you decide to differentiate rather than just fit one of the current market landscapes, you're going to need to do something different. So let's think about what's important. What's important isn't getting 2 decimal places in terms of your forecast or in terms of your probability of technical success. It's being directionally right. It's getting you into the right place, not into the right 2 square centimeters of the market. So your job, the task of the teams in this early phase, is to be iterative. Not to be right, but to be iterative, to get the direction of the opportunity right from having examined lots of different opportunities. So it's liberating. It means you can come up with ideas as a team rather than just trying to predict the ones that you currently have. It tends to lead to this basic idea, which is, which decisions are you taking? Well, in early phase, the decisions that you take are what we would call contingent. It's an if-then decision. So we're going to do this, and if this happens, then we're going to pursue this. But also we might look at this so that if this happens, we can go down this. Well, that's a very different kind of decision-making process than the one that we're employing based on, the old grey-suited consultancies that have told you that a template needs to standardize everything. Because we're not making a final decision in early phase, we're making a contingent one. And it involves a lot of what-if on the way through. So you think about predictions and why they're wrong. I mean, we work with them all of the time now, and we're all tasked with coming up with numbers. But you miss one thing in a prediction paradigm, and everything's off. So we know that they're always wrong, but that's why. It's because we're making predictions on things which have to be wrong, just because many of them are unknowable, not just unknowns in the process. And that's if just one variable, the one missed side effect, is off. But within our development process, we have hundreds of variables which can affect how that drug tends to perform. So then we get back to, well, why does serendipity seem to be more important than planning? Well, that's the reason, which is there's too many variables to fit in. So, and anything about how hard it is to understand the market, well, it's impossible for a TPP to accurately represent a product to anybody. So, what are predictions for if they're always wrong? Can we use any parts of that process in a better process and take out some of the problems that are there? So, one of our tenets was, if you can't be right, be useful. So the goal of evaluation for the teams that do this work is not to be right, it's to be useful to the heads of R&D, to portfolio managers, to their colleagues. Is to ideate, is to evaluate, is to say, well, what if we were to head to this place? And if we can move from prediction to generating hypotheses, the kind of if-then kind of hypotheses, then we're doing something useful. Then let's think about what phase 2 traditionally is for. We tend to interchange it with the idea of proof of concept. Well, the idea of proving concepts is that those concepts, of course, are variables. We could have different concepts in phase 2 of that same one molecule. So if we can engage the R&D folks in a variety of proofs rather than just the one that was laid down a little while back, then we've got the possibility to generate differentiated insight from anyone else. And this is the key to this asymmetry that we talked about before. We want to move from the idea of directed, predicted development to one which is more open, more agile to different ideas on the way through. And we move towards what we would call asymmetric learning. So the idea of taking time to make decisions, taking time to explore, is that you move towards an asymmetric potential because you're going to learn faster, better, harder what the drug does, what the market wants, what all of those things are for. And this kind of idea of a learning environment is a world away from the prediction paradigm which we're all stuck in at the moment. If we look at different options for a drug early and creative options for a drug early, then really the most useful thing is that we're showing a picture, not necessarily numbers, but a picture of risk and opportunity. Where does the risk come from and where does the opportunity come from? But then loop that back in an iterative process so that people can address those risks if they're shown transparently. And we know the problem with the prediction paradigm is that people game the numbers. So, probabilities of success tend to be, over 50%, probably a lot over 50%. But we know that that's not what happens. The number of drugs that had that number assigned to them that then go on to fail shows that it's a useless piece of the journey. So, understanding that means let's think about the humans involved or why they're doing that. They're playing with the incentives. If their incentive was to help the organization be useful, then we'd come up with different options. So, one thing that we want to sort of focus on is if you give the same product to two different companies, that's what's happening today. Giving the same product to two different companies, because very few people have that window of exclusivity on the way through now. So if we focus on human decision making, contingent decision making, our job is to harness asymmetric learning more, faster, more creatively than the competition about the market, about the molecule, about the regulatory process. It's about asking questions, not about trying to predict. So within a deliberative decision-making process, how do we establish those known knowns and the areas of uncertainty? But also, let's think as a portfolio head, as a head of R&D, your teams are guessing your priors. They're guessing whether you want fast or big or easy or hard. What about if they showed you different options which have those things included but not pre-decided before it gets to you? What happens then is you engage the teams in a interdependency, so properly multidisciplinary teams where everyone is creative rather than just taking this baton pass of ideas as they go along the engine. So we're going to talk to you more about 5X and how that addresses this problem of getting to asymmetric learning and away from the prediction paradigm within development. So watch this space and we'll be back to you with some more soon.